Hello and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. So there's another group of people often forgotten about living in the Holy Land who are also fighting for their right to exist: Armenian Christians. Armenian Christians have had a continuous presence in Jerusalem for the past 2,000 years, living peacefully side by side with Jews, Muslims, and other Christian denominations. Now, to understand better, let me show you this map. The Old City of Jerusalem is walled off with entry at gated points, and the Old City is divided into 4 sections. There is the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, and the Armenian quarter, which is also Christian. Now, the Armenians are distinct in that they speak Armenian. They're not Arab, nor are they Jewish, and they have a very distinct culture. They've also been there for a really long time. However, since the rise of the radical settler Zionist movement, they felt their presence in increasing danger, and that danger is more dire than ever. Right now, many in the Armenian community are out protesting, creating human fences, and sleeping on the streets, trying to protect a plot of land that makes up 20% of their quarter in Jerusalem. The land is called Cow's Garden, and the controversy is over a land deal that was struck between the Armenian Church Patriarchate, who is the custodian of the land, and a Jewish businessman named Danny Rubenstein. Now, many believe the deal was predatory, using tactics of intimidation, trickery, and possibly even bribery. More importantly, the Armenians say the legal deal didn't follow the rules and is illegal. Now, Rubenstein says the deal was legal and he intends to immediately begin building a luxury hotel. Now, since the deal was made known, a movement within the Armenian community started called Save the ArQ. That is ArQ, standing for Armenian Quarter. And the group has been out trying to halt the construction until the issue can be taken up with the courts, while Danny Rubenstein has deployed armed radical settlers and bulldozers to the site and is already tearing down walls. So tonight we're going to be talking to Setrag Balian. He is the founder of Save the ArQ, about not only the current land dispute, but also about the status of Armenian Christians in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The plight of Christians in the region is an eye-opener for those who think the conflict is one just between Muslims and Jews. It's not, and we'll be talking about that tonight. But first, let's get to our sponsors, cbdistillery.com. You guys, it is finally here, Black Friday. The Black Friday sale is on, and it is really great. You can get up to 40% off everything when you use the code BF for Black Friday. Black Friday, so BF 2023 is the code you use at checkout, and that link and that information is down below. But choose from a range of expert-formulated CBD and other plant-based solutions for relaxation, stress, sleep, and pain after physical activity, even mood and focus. People absolutely rave about their sleep tinctures and gummies. So imagine that, a calm mind, deep sleep throughout the whole night. It sounds amazing. No artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, or sweeteners, just 100% clean ingredients. So don't miss this massive sale and get up to 40% off your order. Visit cbdistillery.com and enter BF 2023. That's cbdistillery.com. Enter that code BF 2023 to get 40% off. And unfortunately, this is not available in Idaho, Iowa, and South Dakota. Lobby your governments. Another sponsor for tonight's show, Wellness Company. I want to introduce you guys to this great company, and specifically their medical emergency kit. The Wellness Company is committed to supporting you through whatever the next thing is that gets thrown in our way, hopefully not another pandemic. But doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough, started the Wellness Company to build a parallel healthcare system and bring about change in an otherwise corrupt system. And part of that change is helping you take control of your health. Many people don't trust healthcare right now. In fact, over 40% of Americans say they would avoid a doctor or a hospital unless it was catastrophic. That is where the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit comes in. 8 potentially life-saving medications for you to keep on hand in times of need: natural disasters, supply chain shortages, medical emergencies, or even an apocalyptic situation. You can rest easy knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitics. All of that is going to be on hand in this emergency kit to help keep you and your family safe. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not a doctor, how in the world would I know what to take and when? Well, the Wellness Company doctors have you covered, because the kit includes a guidebook detailing how and when and all of the dosing for each of the medications. So if you're like me and you want to be prepared for the unexpected, or the expected. I can expect that something else is going to happen. The powers that be are going to be. Well, then just go to twc.health/Kim and use the code Kim, and you will save 15% at checkout. That is twc.health/Kim. Again, that link is down below, and use the promo code Kim for 15% off. All right, let's get to tonight's show. This is bound to be very interesting. Setrag, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Kim. Thank you very much for having me and for shedding a light on this crucial and existential issue.
So let's go ahead and start off with what is actually happening there on the ground. I know you've just come from being out there protesting. Tell us exactly what the scene is at this moment around Cow's Garden.
Well, honestly, Kim, I never thought that I would say this, but the Cow's Garden today looks like a battlefield. I mean, there are spikes everywhere. There are barricades. There are walls and asphalt that's been destroyed and demolished. The situation is very tense, but the community is gathered, and we are standing firmly on our land, on our historic land, on our historic property, and we are defending it. So for the past 2 weeks, we've been the young people, especially along with the clergy as well, and the patriarch and the patriarchate. We've been fighting off land incursions and further encroachments of this private company who appears to be a front for other organizations.
Which organizations?
So we've just had a confirmation that Ateret Kohanim, which is a big settler organization, might be linked to this private company. This private company has a lot of shell companies. It was created specifically for this deal. So, and the two involved the two involved individuals who are Danny Rothman Rubinstein and George Warwar are known, I mean, to have criminal records and are very shady business people.
I think this is an important point to start off with, that a lot of the land expansion that Palestinians complain about, and potentially the Armenian community as well, is that it's not the government of Israel that is expanding, but it is private companies that are buying up property, buying up land. Can you explain that a little bit to us? Because I think a lot of people believe that it's the Israeli government, for example, that is creating settlements and buying up property in Jerusalem. But it's more complicated than that. There's a lot of players involved with that same agenda. Would you say that's
Of course,
accurate?
that is accurate. It's much more complicated than that, but the Israeli government does have a hand in this. I mean, they've kind of privatized, in a way, the settlement industry, where they act through different private companies, so they are not targeted by the different states and by the diplomatic pressure. So they use private companies for further encroachments on lands that are beyond the 1967 line. So the Jerusalem municipality, and we will see when we talk about the deal how they are involved, and the Jerusalem Development Authority, known as Harli, is also very involved in these issues and in these land grabs, so to speak.
So explain to us what Cow's Garden is and why it's important to the Armenian community.
So Cow's Garden represents actually about 20% of the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. It's known as the Cow's Garden because there actually used to be cows over there and other animals. It was later also used by the pilgrims for a very long time, by Armenian pilgrims who used to come in their caravans and tents and stay there. It's an open area. It is located in the old city of Jerusalem. It is the most strategic point of the old city because it is the highest point. And when you start understanding the old city of Jerusalem, where when you see pictures, it's all houses. How do you say? Houses. It's a quite dense area. The old city is very dense with homes, so the open areas are very rare. So they
Right.
have been specifically and continuously targeted by the authorities, by these private companies, and so on. It is also important to mention that the Cow's Garden is directly adjacent to the Armenian convent of St. James, which houses 3 Armenian churches, the St. James Cathedral, where the head of Santiago de Compostela lies, His body is in Spain, a major pilgrimage site for Christians all over the world. And it is also adjacent to the Armenian seminary. So the Armenian communal life and ecclesiastic life is under threat when the cow's garden is taken away from the hands of Armenians.
So my understanding is there have been for quite a long time attempts to purchase Cow's Garden or to it's being leased, right? That's the land is going to be not purchased but leased for 99 years.
Yes, to be more specific, it's 98 years. It's 49 years and automatically renewable unless the other side, the private company, does not wish it. So during the past 30, 40 years, there has been immense pressure, even from the Jerusalem municipality and other private companies, to acquire that land through different means. But up until now, the Patriarchate had not succumbed to these pressures. It's also important to note that it was a huge contention point between the Israelis and Palestinians during the Camp David Accords, when in 2000 Yehud Barak with Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton these were the closest. These negotiations were one of the most important, and they were the closest to reaching a deal. But the major issues remained, of course, the old city of Jerusalem, but more specifically the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem, because the Israeli side wanted to split the Armenian quarter in half, whereas Arafat back then famously said, "I am Arafatian," the famous Armenian suffix of yan, to express his solidarity with the Armenian quarter and with his opposition to the splitting of the Armenian quarter. And he said the Armenian quarter shall remain next to its brother quarters, the Christian quarter and the Muslim quarter, as part of a future Palestinian state. The second major issue in these negotiations were the right of return of Palestinians, which amount to today to 5 million Palestinian refugees. So you can see the weight that is given to the Armenian quarter and the strategic and geopolitical importance it has.
What does this developer want to do with the land? He wants to build a hotel. What kind of
Officially,
I mean,
they say it's a 7-star hotel. That's how it was marketed by the defrocked priest.
I didn't know there was
I
such a
don't know if
thing.
they exist. Yeah,
Yeah, 7-star hotel. Wow.
exactly.
Okay.
So even their rating system is off the chart.
Right.
But so on paper, the deal goes as such. It's 11,500 square meters, which includes the cow's garden, which is the large parking area. So after being used for cows, that area was actually parking for the Armenian community. And so this includes the large parking area, but also the Patriarchate's private parking, the Patriarchate's private garden, the hall of the seminary, and also 5 Armenian family homes.
And do they intend to demolish all of that and to build this 7-star hotel?
Well, if the plan goes according to their wishes, yes, there will be demolition of all these areas. And I mean, to just grasp the severity of this problem is that the Armenian Patriarchate's garden, for example, private garden, is right beneath the Armenian Patriarchate, the seat of the Armenian Patriarch of Jerusalem, and the seminary hall is stuck to the Armenian seminary, to the Armenian theological life. So there's a very big danger for Armenian life once more, for the community, for the church members.
Yeah, who do they envision would stay in a hotel in the Armenian quarter?
I mean, look, if a hotel were to actually be built there, it would have huge success. The Cow's Garden is directly bordering the ramparts of the old city, and it has amazing views of Jerusalem. As I said, it is on the highest point of the old city of Jerusalem.
Right.
But the problem is that is it going to be a hotel? That's the big question, because there are a lot of clauses in the contract that suggest otherwise. For example, first there's a clause about the use of adjacent lands, which is very terrifying, which permits the private company to use adjacent lands, but the adjacent lands are not mentioned in any way as to where they end. And also because there's a clause of transferability, and this is the most dangerous clause. It means this company can transfer the land to a third party, without even the consent of the Armenian Patriarchate, only with a written notice to the Armenian Patriarchate. So these 2 points actually are the very dangerous, along with the fact that, as I said, these are very shady business people, shady companies, and the location. Once more, we live in Jerusalem. This is not Switzerland. This is not France. This is the most contested and disputed piece of territory. This is a thrice holy city. And there is an occupation after 1967. This is according to international law. Jerusalem is occupied. And under international law also, there is a strict there is a huge effort to keep the status quo as it is until they reach a final deal during negotiations, which would include the two-state solution with the Palestinian and Israeli state living side by side.
And where do the Armenians see themselves in this? Because you're a distinct group. You're not Arab. You're not Jews. You're this. You speak a
Yes.
what language do you speak? All three languages? Do you speak? What is your
I speak
primary?
actually 6 languages, but
Okay.
my mother tongue is Armenian. And then I went to a French school. I'm also a French citizen. So I speak French, English, and then Arabic, Hebrew, which are the local languages. And I've learned Spanish and so on in school.
What do you use mostly in your daily life?
In the Armenian Quarter and in my daily life, Armenian is the most used language. I mean, we've been able to preserve our identity and our culture, and mainly thanks to the walls of the Armenian convent and to the integrity of the Armenian Quarter. And also because of the neutral stance we've kept throughout the centuries. We don't feel the need to be involved in the conflict. Although, I'm going to be honest with you, some Armenians feel a bit Israeli, a small minority. A small minority feels Palestinian Armenian, as I do, but the vast majority feels they consider themselves as Jerusalemite Armenians.
Right.
They use the term Jerusalemite Armenians to exclude any kind of political connotation. So that is how we've actually been able to keep our traditions, our identity, our culture, and also we don't feel the need to be a part of the political issues because we've been there also for a very long time, if not one of the longest presence in Jerusalem is the Armenian presence. It dates back to 2 millennia at least, and the Armenian Patriarchate is a 1600-year-old institution. So we don't feel obligated to justify our presence apart from our national Armenian identity.
Who issues your papers? Do you have a passport? Are you a national citizen of Israel? Are you a citizen of Jordan? Right. I know you have French papers, but what is the typical person go ahead.
So I'm a French citizen, but most Armenians have the status of Jerusalemite Palestinians. It means they have the blue ID, they have the Jordanian passport without full Jordanian rights, and they have the Israeli travel document, laissez-passer, without full Israeli citizen rights. So it is a quite difficult situation, but a small minority also has Israeli citizenship.
Okay. And this is something important, I think, for the audience to understand is that there are 3 separate, distinct sort of groups inside of the Holy Land region. So you have Israelis, obviously, who have Israeli passports and they can travel, and they're Israeli citizens, and that's pretty clean cut and clear. The other 2 groups, it's not quite as clear or as clean. So if you're a Palestinian living in the West Bank, like you're born in Bethlehem and you're born in the West Bank proper, what papers would you carry? You carry then Jordanian passports? How do they travel the world? Because they're technically stateless people.
Yeah, and it's very tough for them to travel, actually. Some have Jordanian and Palestinian citizenship. A lot of them have Palestinian citizenship, those in the West Bank.
So if they have
Gaza, and in order...
If they have Palestinian citizenship, do they carry Is there an actual Palestinian passport?
Yes, it is, and it says State of Palestine. And this came, if I'm not mistaken, following the recognition by the General Assembly of over 135 states of the State of Palestine as an observer member, but this came following that.
So it's fair. So actually, on that side, it's fairly clear as well. These are Palestinian citizens of the State of Palestine. The issue is when they want to travel. there is no Palestinian airport. So they have to get to a Jordanian airport in order to travel. And so Jordan has to give them special permissions or travel documents, or how do they get out of Palestine?
Exactly. So they have a border with Jordan, which is also controlled by Israel, by the way. There are also others which are not, and they have to cross into Jordan and use the Jordanian airports to travel abroad. Uh,
So does Jordan
Obviously, this
give them a
applies only to the.
special? Does Jordan give them special like papers in order to go cross their borders to use their airport?
I mean, they can cross it with the Palestinian passports. You know,
Okay,
some also have Jordanian passports, as I said, and some even have foreign passports. You know, Chilean and other
sure,
European passports. But
sure.
because they're of Palestinian descent, they have to go through Jordan to travel. Until recently, even the U.S. citizens. But maybe you've heard that there was a trial period where they would be able to leave from Israeli airports. The U.S. citizens, Palestinian descent.
Right, yeah, the Palestinian Americans who are
Yeah.
living in the West Bank.
Exactly.
Um, I've explained this on this show a couple of times, but the when you're an American and and you go into the Holy Land area into Israel, you can go anywhere you want as an American. You can travel anywhere you want. But when they figure out, I've found out that when the Israeli government finds out that the American is a Palestinian of Palestinian descent, could have been born in America, doesn't matter, born and raised in
Yes.
America, sounds like me with accents. They when they figure it out, then they say, "Oh, wait a minute, now you're different," and they actually
Yes. This
limit
is a,
the travel, the ability of movement for these American citizens who are living in the West
exactly.
Bank. Yeah,
They
which is
even
very
deny their
controversial.
entry through. They even deny their entry through Israeli ports of entry. So ports of entries.
And they don't even let
But
them go to
this is
Jerusalem to visit family members who might be living in Jerusalem. So then let's explain Jerusalem, because Jerusalem has its. So then Jerusalem is truly stateless. If you're not an Israeli Jerusalemite, because Israeli Jerusalemites have Israeli citizenship, but the
exactly.
Armenians, the the Palestinians living in Jerusalem
Mhm.
are actually stateless. Is that right? And they just
Yes.
carry like green cards in their own countries. Like they families have
Exactly.
been there for hundreds of years.
Other Christian minorities as well, and Armenians. Most of us have came in 1915 after the Armenian genocide. Most of us are descendants of survivors of the Armenian genocide. So we've been here for 100 years, but still we are issued permanent residencies and not citizenship, and we don't have full rights. That's the fact of the matter.
Are
And
you able
also,
to
this, of
get
course,
go ahead.
and this, of course, what we're talking about, but the West Bank does not apply to Gaza in terms of travel because, as you know, it's been under a blockade of 15 years. So even
Right.
Gaza Strip is a separate issue. And within the Israeli society and the Israeli citizens, you have also 20% that are Israeli Palestinians, or they call them Israeli Arabs or or Arabs of 1948, because these are the people that were not expulsed from the lands and decided to take Israeli citizenship right away in 1948.
Right. But they have the full rights, the full individual basic rights of an Israeli. They don't have the same national rights. I try to explain that. It's again very complicated that they can't just marry somebody and bring them to come live with them in Israel. They've got a lot of restrictions on them, but they do have the same, just in their daily life, the same basic human rights. So they can
Yes.
travel out of Tel Aviv, out of the airport there,
Yes,
and
yes, of course.
yeah,
I mean, it's again, it's an issue of second-class citizens, as they like to put it as well, because they feel a different treatment from the state, especially after the passing of the Chok HaLeum, they call it, the national law, whereas the land of Israel is recognized as the land for the self-determination of the Jewish people exclusively, and where Arabic was also removed as an official language, although I mean it's very much needed because of the 20%, but also because Palestinians of the West Bank, they come in and go, they have work permits, so
yeah.
that is also, yes, an issue.
So the Jerusalemites are in this very awkward and very strange position. And if you leave, if you decide to, what happens to you if you move out of Jerusalem? So if you've got this encroachment and the land is now that you say that there's some family homes that are potentially being
Yeah.
purchased that are in this contract, and these families have to leave. If they leave Jerusalem, are they ever allowed to come back to Jerusalem to live?
If they leave Israel, now they can leave Jerusalem, go live in Tel Aviv, or go live somewhere else. But if they go to the West Bank or to some foreign country, it becomes very hard for them to keep their residency. There are like limits to as to how long they can be absent from the country, and then if the Israeli government feels that the center of your life is not in Jerusalem or Israel, they can also revoke your residency. You have to prove that you went. For example, I went to study abroad, and then you have to prove that you studied, and you have to show your transcripts and so on, just to keep your residency. So it is quite difficult, yeah. With residency permits, even if it's permanent residency, it's quite difficult to keep them if you decide to leave the country.
Now, are Jewish Jerusalemites subject to those same rules?
No, of course not. Jewish Jerusalemites are full citizens of Israel, so they can leave whenever they want, come back whenever they want. They can be absent for 10, 15 years. But even non-Jewish Jerusalemites, although there have been some rumors of discrimination, which I cannot confirm, even when they have citizenship, but mainly even when you do have citizenship, it's harder for them to revoke your citizenship than it is the permanent residency.
Right. So permanent residency, the feeling amongst many of the people living in Jerusalem who do not have Israeli citizenship feel constantly like they have to fight for their existence, and that is just by being there. You have to be there. How long are you able to be gone for? I thought is it 3 months? You're only allowed to be gone for 3 months, and then you have to
No,
come
no,
back, or is it longer than
no,
that?
that's exaggerated.
Okay.
I think it's a year and a half up until 3 years, but it's better to do it within a year and a half. I think it depends. It's also case by case. Like there's no fixed law about it, but uh, it's a year and a half is I think the most people would feel comfortable leaving
Okay.
the
And
country.
again, you have to prove that your life didn't change, that you didn't move somewhere else and center your life. So it could only be for some reason, like a like studying abroad or
Studying
traveling
abroad
or
and
something
yes,
along those lines. And yeah, okay.
yeah.
So tell us about the deal with Cow's Garden, because this is where it gets controversial. You have a now defrocked priest who apparently was in charge of real estate deals for the
Yes.
Armenian Patriarchate, right?
So, yes, he was the director of real estate of the Armenian Patriarchy.
Because the argument on the Rubenstein, his response to this is, well, the deal was done. I didn't steal it. This isn't a steal. I didn't come in and just grab it. There was a deal, a contract that was negotiated, a contract that was signed, and it was signed by the Patriarchate, who technically owns the land. And so this is a legitimate business deal. What do you say to that?
Of course, but first of all, there are bylaws of the Patriarchate that were completely disregarded. So it is an illegal deal because it does not respect the bylaws of the Patriarchate. The Patriarchate passed these bylaws once in 2005, again in 2006, and re-ratified them in 2015, which would require special permissions and signatures from the Synod and the General Assembly of the St. James Brotherhood in order to ratify deals over 25 years.
Mm.
And also, deals over 49 years are forbidden according to the bylaws, even with automatic renewal. I mean, they're not fooling anyone. And so, to understand the structure of the Armenian Patriarchate, it goes the Patriarch, which is the executive and almost absolute power, to be honest. Then you have the Holy Synod, which is comprised of 7 to 8 priests, which is basically the cabinet. And then you have the General Assembly of the St. James Brotherhood, which acts kind of like the both houses of Congress, you know. And so both these institutions, both these powers, I mean, the Synod and the General Assembly, were not, first of all, made aware of the deal, and second, never ratified the deal. So first issue is there. Second, to Danny Rubenstein, first of all, our struggle began as an internal struggle because yes, the Patriarchate in the end signed the deal with the director of the real estate and the Grand Sacristan. and they did not have the right to. So our main issue was with the patriarchate, and it was trying to get them on board with us to cancel this deal, to annul this deal, because it is completely against the interests of the Armenian community and the Armenian patriarchate. But this private company, through Danny Rubinstein and George Warwar, started intimidating the community members, started threatening the community members, and using all these, below the belt tactics, to kind of scare the Armenians. And that's
Can
when
you
our
can you give us an example?
well, let me give you a very recent example, and we were going to get into this anyway. So on October 26th, finally, after 6 months of protests by the community, after a huge PR campaign and pressure from different Armenian institutions and organizations, the Armenian Patriarchate officially sent a letter informing the private company of their willingness to cancel the deal. So right after that deal, after that letter was sent, they came in with bulldozers instead of coming to the negotiations table, because that's what the procedure requires. You want to cancel, you meet with the other side, you
Right.
negotiate, maybe you can reach a solution. If not, you go to court.
Right.
But instead, they resorted to these cheap tactics where they hired 2 bulldozers without any permits, without any licenses, and started demolishing a wall that separated the private Armenian parking and the bigger Cows Garden area. And when that didn't work, they came in with armed settlers and dogs to try and scare and intimidate the community. But little did they know that this would empower and unite the community. And that's exactly what happened. With 200 people, we stood strongly and firmly against them, even though we're unarmed, And Kim, the Armenian community of Jerusalem is known to be one of the most peaceful communities. The Armenian Patriarchate Road, which is the only car road access in the Old City, is the safest road for people of all denominations, of all religions, be it Jews, Muslims, foreigners, tourists. But this does not mean that we will cower away or that we will be afraid. This means that we believe in peaceful coexistence, but once you threaten us and you threaten our properties and you threaten our presence, we will fight back. And not with guns and not with dogs and not like thugs. We will fight back diplomatically. We will fight back using every pressure we can. We will fight back by doing a human chain wall. We will use every peaceful tactic there is, because we refuse to resort to violence. One, because we will never win in that way. You're talking about a state apparatus, you're talking about armed settlers, whereas we're unarmed completely. So we will not get into that fight, into that dogfight. And we will use every mean we have, be it diplomatically or PR-wise, to exert pressure and to stop them from further encroachments on our properties.
So this is supposed to be a disputed legal battle, and now, the people that have leased out this land are not coming to the legal negotiation. They're not wanting to go through the process legally. They're just saying no, and they're starting to bulldoze and use armed settlers. Why are settlers allowed to be armed and to come in like a militia group and intimidate people? Why does who is the police? Are there like police in Jerusalem? It's not the IDF, right? It's like a separate group.
It's a mix of both. There's also the
Okay.
police, there's also border patrol, and there's also the IDF.
So
So
why are they not coming in and saying you're not allowed to have these weapons and intimidate people with your weapons?
First of all, they're legally allowed to carry them, but of course they're not allowed to intimidate weaponless and peaceful protesters or encroach on land. But you're talking about, let's go to the bigger picture. Ever since last year, there's been an extreme radical right-wing government in Israel who has settlers, settlers in the government, and even people like Ben Gvir, who used to belong to a terrorist organization, and the terrorist organization according to Israel, not only according to the world.
Right.
So, and this person is the Minister of National Security, so he's in charge of the police. So if you want to complain to the police, okay, you go to the police chief. If you want to go higher, it's this person, this settler, who enables this kind of behavior.
Yeah,
and of
let's
course,
point that
after
out.
the arrival of this...
Yeah, let's just make that point one more time real clearly, that this man who's now in charge of the security, that he's the minister of security, right, for Israel. He's been
Of
appointed
national
this,
security.
of national
Yeah.
security, was belonged to an actual terrorist organization that is labeled a terrorist organization, not just internationally, but by Israel itself.
Yes.
And yet Netanyahu
Exactly.
made this guy the minister of national security. That's the
Exactly.
issue that is happening in Israel and in the Holy Land, and the battle that people are facing. How do
And
people fight
and
back in a
And
situation
you
like
know,
that?
he was charged with incitement to violence and hate and discrimination and so on. So the patriarchate and the community has no address locally, nationally to complain to, you know. So
Right.
it's a very tough situation. But I also want to add that the Armenian quarter is right next to the Jewish quarter, and we've lived peacefully for about 30, 40, 50 years with our Jewish neighbors and neighbors. But these are a complete different group of people. These are, as we call them, hilltop youth. You know, they come from the hills of Jerusalem. They're settlers. They don't understand the cultural mosaic of Jerusalem. They don't understand the intricacies and the diversity of Jerusalem. For them, there's one clear goal, and it's the complete Judaization of Jerusalem, specifically of the old city of Jerusalem. And ever since this government came, all the Christians have felt an increase in attacks. They spit on our church members, on our clergy members, they spit on our priests, they urinate, excuse me for saying, they urinate on our walls, on our convent walls. They see a cross, they want to bring it down. I mean, we've had so many incidents in the past 8 to 9 months, in the past year, and it's increased exponentially after the arrival of this government because, of course, they feel empowered and they face total impunity.
Yeah. Well, and you've got Netanyahu saying things like, we're going to annex the West Bank. And now with what's happening in Gaza, clearly taking the northern part of the strip. So they are very empowered.
I mean, yeah, I'm trying to understand, when has violence ever, this kind of violence ever solved a huge political conflict such as this one? I mean, when they had the chance to do peace, instead of letting this hate and this fear among the populations get instilled and developed and encroached, they should have made it, because Jews and Arabs and Christians have lived on these lands for centuries and centuries and millennia. And, you know, they call each other, Jews and Muslims, Wulad Am, biblically, which means cousins,
Hmm.
the son of my uncle. This is how they call each other. I mean, let's not forget that in the Arab world, before the Zionist movement, before the creation of the State of Israel, uh, Jews were the most prosperous populations of the Arab world, the most respected. When meanwhile there was the Inquisition in Spain, and when the Nazis were committing a Holocaust and a
Right.
massacre. So, you know, and this is what makes it difficult to understand. But once more, it's the big powers that are in play, it's the big governments, and the ultimate people who pay the price are the average people and the average population.
Right. It's this new ideology. It's not Jews, it's Zionism. And this new Zionism that has cropped up since the late 1800s, early 1900s. So the Christian population there is feeling also, so it's not just Jews versus Muslims. This is Christians are also feeling the same persecution.
Yeah, this is extremist settler Jews, extremist radical settler Jews against everyone else,
Yeah.
against the goys, as they call them. You know, during when the armed settlers came, you know what he said? He said, "Well, either way, you're all goys, and when the Messiah will come, you will all die." So I turned and I told them, then why don't you just wait for the Messiah and we'll all die? Why do you go through all this headache? I mean, isn't it simpler to wait for
Right.
the Messiah and wait for him to kill us all? I mean,
And this person said this to you?
yes, yes, it was actually said during the confrontation between the armed groups and the peaceful Armenian community and the church.
Wow. Have the Armenian people so clearly been there for, like you said, potentially 2,000 years? I think the first recorded that we know of is like 400 AD. Is that right? Or
Well, that's the first Christian pilgrims that arrived. You know, as you know, Armenia is the first nation to accept Christianity in 301. So the pilgrims arrived quite early, but there's even back in the Roman times, Armenians
mm,
were brought. You know, even that road, the Armenian Patriarchate road today, 2000 years ago, was called Via degli Armeni in Latin, because the Roman army, when they entered Jerusalem, it was the 10th or 11th, I don't want to say something wrong, but 10th or 11th legion was called the Armenian Legion.
Hmm.
And they're the one that entered the old city through Jaffa Gate. So it is a very important presence. And also we have equal rights in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, along with the Latins and the Greeks, which are, I mean, you're talking about for the Latins, the Catholics, it's
Hmm.
1.2 billion followers, whereas Armenia is a nation of 10 million people, and even in the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem in Palestine, we have equal rights, and we have even a bigger area than the others. So the Armenians have played a pivotal role in the life of Jerusalem and the Christian life of Jerusalem. And also the first printing press of Jerusalem was in the Armenian Quarter. Published his first book in 1833. The first photography studio. I mean, the most known craftsmen, be it jewelry, ceramics, you name it. I mean, shoemakers, tailors, they were all Armenians. And even Swiss watchmakers would come from Switzerland to get advice from an Armenian family that was known for watchmaking. So we have been a crucial part of the development of the city. We have been a crucial part of the history of the city. And right now, our presence is endangered by these extremist radical groups who want only Jews in the old city of Jerusalem and in Jerusalem and in all of the Holy Land.
Yeah. What about during the Muslim rules? I mean, you've been there. The community's been there for 2,000 years, so there's been a lot of changing of hands and a lot of different religions. What was life like for the Armenian people under like Ottomans or under these various different caliphs?
Look, the biggest prosperity of Armenians was during the Crusades. I'm not going to lie, because we have had Armenian queens of Jerusalem, like Queen Melisandre, who were helpful in that as well. And because of the role that the Kingdom of Kilikia, the Armenian Kingdom of Kilikia, played in the Crusades. But
Well, it
we've
makes
had,
sense because it's Christian and the Armenian
of
population is
course,
Christian, so Christians were protected during the Crusades.
of course. So it's not something new, but even during Muslim rules, we were quite protected. There's a plaque at the entrance of the Armenian convent by Omar ibn al-Khattab that says, God curse those who harm the Armenians for 7 generations. So, and they've been different fatwas and declarations from sheikhs and grand sheikhs of Cairo and Iraq and other places when the Armenian genocide was happening, that you should protect Armenians, you should take them in, you should. So we did not have any existential, let's put it that way, problems. Of course, we had problems. I mean, there's discrimination, and you're talking about 5 centuries ago. Life was different, this is not it's not the same times, but we were quite protected throughout our presence in Jerusalem. And the biggest existential threat we faced, one was in the 18th century, and this is a very interesting story. We had a lot of debts. The Armenian Patriarchate was heavily indebted, and they decided to name a very humble and modest priest called Krikor the chain bearer. Why did they call him chain bearer? So because he put chains around his neck once he became patriarch, and he said, I will not remove these chains until I fully pay off all the debts of the Armenian Patriarchate. And with those chains, he traveled all over the world. This is 18th century. From church to church, stood and did fundraising, and he was able to pay off the debts. He was even able to acquire more properties for the Armenian Patriarchate, and even built the walls of the Armenian convent. So this is the kind of people we've had in our history, and it's very sad to see the situation we're in now. And this existential threat has been accelerated, unfortunately, and I say this with a heavy heart, by the creation of Israel and the occupation of Jerusalem in 1967. And this is very hurtful to say. As an Armenian, of course, I understand the Jewish people, they've been massacred. There was a Holocaust, there was a genocide, which, by the way, until now, Israel still doesn't recognize. But this is a different issue. I mean, as a nation, as a people, the only place where you can feel safe, unfortunately, is in your own state, And this was proven even with the persecution of Jews and the persecution of Armenians throughout our history. We're old civilizations, 3,000-4,000 years. even as a state, Israel, surrounded by enemies, again, quote unquote, like Armenia, where it's very difficult. But there's one thing that cannot be forgiven and that cannot be justified, Kim, and that is the occupation of another people. This is the most horrible thing you can see. This is the most dehumanizing. I mean, it's really awful, and no one in their right mind can justify the occupation except those who dehumanize those people who are occupied. And this comes back to the same plight that Jews faced. This was the Primo Levi's si c'est un homme, if it was a man, if it were a man. This is the easiest tactic to justify an occupation and oppression is to dehumanize the person in front of you. And this is exactly what's happened. Once I had two Australian tourists and Australian Jewish tourists, or South African Jewish, sorry. I was showing them around the Armenian quarter, and then she asked me a question. Look at the loaded question. Like, but the Armenian community is a peaceful community, right? They are pro-Israel. So there's this automatic, thing that if you're peaceful, you're pro-Israel. If you're not peaceful, you're not pro-Israel, anti-Israel. And I told her, listen, as an Armenian, I feel a higher moral obligation to speak out against injustices, to speak out against these kind of horrible treatments of human beings. And you as a Jew have also that higher moral obligation to speak out against these things.
So let's get into the deal again, and the patriarchate and the defrocked priest. And there's also someone else that was also there's 3 signatures that were on this deal. What is their excuse for doing this deal? I mean, surely now you've got all the people rising up, protesting, human chains, trying to stop the destruction of 20% of the Armenian quarter?
Yes, about 20%.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a huge chunk. What is their excuse for signing these documents?
Their excuse is ignorance. Their excuse is we were not aware that the mastermind was this priest. There is some truth to it. That's what I want to believe, and what I do believe, that the defrocked priest even built physical barriers between the homes, the private parking, and the larger cow's garden to show the patriarch, as in, look, this is the physical barrier, So this is only the part that is leased. Although the Armenian community, and let me say it, we are against any lease of that land to any development company that is not going to protect the interests of Armenians, of the Armenian community and the patriarchate. But he used a lot of manipulation, and also, mismanagement and ignorance plays a huge role in it. The Grand Sacristan, these are church people. These are not businessmen. These are not real estate people. These are not lawyers. So it is quite easy to manipulate them, especially, and also if there were cases of corruption, I'm 100% sure there were a lot of corruption in this deal, but obviously it's very hard to prove when it's under the table, when it's cash money, But this is the excuse they use. This is what we have now. We fought for 6 months for the cancellation. Now we are on the way to cooperating together. In June of 2023, actually, we hired a team of lawyers from the United States. So the Save the ArQ movement, which was founded by myself and Hagop Jernazyan, who is, exceptional person. He's 23 years old, and he does more than all these people combined, and he's been at the front of this since 2 years ago. I used to live in Armenia, but when I came back, I became much more involved, and this whole movement started from the two of us 6 months ago, basically when the defrocked priest was defrocked and taken out of Jerusalem. So as I was saying, now we are cooperating. We hired the team of lawyers, which has Armenian American lawyers headed by Karnik Kerkonyan, which is Kerkonyan Dajani law firm, who also worked on the opening of the Lachin corridor, the decision of the International Court of Justice, and his team with Elizabeth Al-Dajani, Ani Nazarian, Garo Ghazarian. I would like to thank, immensely, which are doing this work pro bono, and also Arman Tatoyan from Armenia, who was the former Deputy Minister of Justice and also an ad hoc judge of the European Court. So they've been a lot of help. And we've hired a local team of lawyers that's comprised of one Jewish Israeli and one Arab Palestinian Israeli lawyer, to kind of avoid that political talk. No, this is an Armenian and Christian issue, first and foremost. And Daniel Seidman is also working pro bono. He's very involved in the Christian issues in Jerusalem. Also an American Jewish person, a huge following on X. So we have this legal team, which is now working with the legal team of the Armenian Patriarchate. We're still in negotiations because we want full transparency, and not because we don't trust this person or that person, but because we've lost complete trust in the institution. And this is a completely vertical institution. And the community members have no say whatsoever in their future, in the future of their children, and in properties that belong to the Armenian nation. They do not belong to the Armenian Patriarch. They say he's the legal owner. Yes, on paper maybe, but he's not even the legal owner. He's the custodian of these lands. To take the example of the Cow's Garden, this land was acquired over 5 centuries through 19 transactions. So through the sweat and blood and of benefactors, Armenian benefactors that gave money to the Patriarchate and the convent for them to acquire this land, and it was just given away with 1 or 2 or 3 signatures, just on a whim. So our struggle is not only the Cow's Garden. This is just the catalyst in the beginning of the struggle. Our struggle in the Patriarchy, in the Archdiocese of Jerusalem. Our struggle is to work hand in hand, not to supervise or take all the power away from the church people, and because they have as an institution 1500 years, as I said. But we live in different times, and we need checks and balances. Single individuals are easily corruptible, but when you have a system of checks and balances, it's the cornerstone and basic principles of any democracy. And this is actually what we want. We want our voices to be heard, and we want these mistakes not to be repeated, because today we will save probably the Cow's Garden, but tomorrow we might have other properties that will be endangered, and other priests, such as the defrocked priest, who will be manipulated, who will be corruptible, and who will sell our properties and lands just with one signature.
So these bylaws that were adopted, the basic, what I'm understanding is that the fundamental contestation of this deal is that it was illegal, that it didn't follow all of the rules that are set up in place in order to prevent a random corrupt one person from doing something like this. These are checks and balances.
Let me tell you more.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you more. The Synod, following the deal, the Synod released a letter in September of 2021, if I'm not mistaken, that they are opposed to this deal. A majority of the General Assembly members also released a letter that they are opposed to this deal. So that form of checks and balances completely failed.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
and when you
once
say
again,
assembly, when you're talking about this government, what is this government that you're talking about specifically? This is not like the Knesset, right? Or what is this?
No, the General Assembly is within the Armenian quarter, so it's comprised of 30 priests, 31 now with the defrocked priests, 30 priests. A lot of them also serve outside of Jerusalem, because the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem is also a landowner in Jordan, in Syria, and Turkey, and also sends their bishops and their clergy members outside to serve other Armenian churches. But they belong to the Brotherhood of St. James, we call it, the General Assemblies, basically. And they failed because they're easily threatened defrocking by the Patriarch. He can literally defrock the whole Brotherhood if he wants, and he's the presiding, and he presides over the Holy Synod. So it's kind of a fake checks and balances, It's absolute power. It's basically absolute monarch. It's the king.
Yeah.
It's the absolute monarch. It's Louis XIV.
So if this is an internal kind of assembly and internal bylaws that were adopted by this group of priests, who then do you take this legal case to?
No. So if these internal laws do not go against Israeli laws, first of all, they are valid. And also, Israeli parliament passed a law, a memorandum or law, I'm not, where the deals with the church institutions would need to be ratified by the synod, because they've had huge amounts of problem with properties that were sold by one priest or a few priests or one patriarch and another. They actually demanded, I think, from the Ministry of Justice to be sure that the Holy Synod ratifies the deal, as to not have any legal problems further down the line. But again, it's tough in Israeli courts, but the legal battle would start in Israeli courts. You cannot go either way to international courts until you uh, use all your means locally, which is Israeli courts at this point.
And how often do the
So,
Israeli
and this
courts
is,
side with
sorry,
how often do they side with people with the minority groups?
uh, look, it's not even a question of that. It's more a question of, do these minority group leaders, which are the churches in this case, have the actual true intentions and motives to cancel these deals, or are they also compromised and so on? Because if we take the example of the Greek Patriarchate, uh, uh, this is a very important story and very similar to the Armenian case, located on Jaffa Gate. So two hotels called the Imperial Hotel and the Petra Hotel were sold by the former Greek Patriarch of Jerusalem, Irenaeus. So they removed Irenaeus, and the new Patriarch came, and they went to a legal battle for 15 years, and they lost the case. But they lost the case. First of all, they did not use the Synod argument for some reason, and second of all, they're completely absolved of the crimes, because it's easy for them to say this was done by the former patriarch. This is why we have never asked for the resignation of our current patriarch. Because you did this with your own hands, you need to fix it with your own hands. Otherwise, the new patriarch who will come will say, okay, I tried everything. I went to courts for 15 years. I put $2 million or $3 million. It didn't work. Can you go against this new patriarch 15 years later? And in this region, where God knows what will happen in 15 years, especially to the Christian minority and the Christian present. So what we've done is, and this is unprecedented in the Christian communities of Jerusalem and the Holy Land, is that we've hired a legal team and we coordinate with them all the time, and we want full transparency and full cooperation with the Patriarchate. And this is what would ensure our part of the checks and balances, and to be sure that they have actually the true motives and the true intentions to restore this land and to cancel this outrageous deal. And one of the arguments again of Rubinstein or the defrocked priest is this is a purely commercial deal. Kim, this is, as I explained, the importance of this land. The defrocked priest himself in an interview says, this is the most valuable piece of real estate in the world. In the world. And you know how much they're getting for it? $300,000 annually.
Oh,
Plus a lump sum of $2 million.
wow.
So you're talking about Times Square, New York. You're talking about Oxford Circus, Oxford Street in London, the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's a ridiculous amount. And this is how we're sure that there were other amounts that were in play under the table and so on. Even commercially, I'm sorry to say this, anyone with the modicum of a brain or of awareness would see that this is not a commercially beneficial deal,
No,
The
300
Armenian
grand a
court,
year for a hotel to be placed on that land, let's say. They're going to be making those types of profits monthly, potentially.
and even worse, if they have shops in the hotel, like below the hotel,
Right, shops,
we don't get the rent from that. There was also, to be fair, plus 5% of the profits of the hotel.
Okay.
But if the hotel registers a loss, it's deducted from the annual rental fee.
Oh, wow.
And we all know how easy it is to register a loss. You
Right,
can increase
right.
salaries of the CEO and
Oh, yeah, that's just
expenses left and right.
move some numbers around. Wow, that is
So
so.
it's yeah.
The patriarchate, from what I understand, the other two signatures on this contract, they claim that they trusted the now defrocked priest, that they trusted him because he was in charge of real estate deals. And so he said, "This is a good deal, trust me." And they said, "Well, that is your job. So, okay, we trust you if you say this is a good deal." But does that, I mean, it seems to me that why would the patriarchate agree at all to any deal with any businessman wanting to come and do something? I mean,
Yeah.
whether they thought it was a good deal or not, let's say it was why would they even agree to give 20% of the land in this way and not to
For 98
Armenian
years.
groups?
No, there were actually other hotel deals that were negotiated on this land with an Armenian investor, which did not, bring any result. There was one with the Jordanian investor who was the head of, I think, the Four Seasons or Kempinski Hotel. And it was a much better deal than this one, but it
Yeah.
was refused by the Synod and by the Patriarchate. So even better deals have come and they were refused. But Kim, this is the biggest question I ask myself is the motivation. I stand in the four walls of the Armenian convent. I look at the beauty of it, and I can feel the history. I can feel the stones breathing almost. You know, I look at the cow's garden. I see the ramparts of the old city, the open space, and I say, who in their right mind would actually give this land away? So I tried to convince myself, okay, it was corruption, pressure from the government, but even that was not existent. They did not even need to go to that extent where they would use the pressures from the Israeli government to actually take this land. Because there have been pressures by the former mayor, for example, Teddy Kollek, back in the 80s, 90s, for that land. But they did not succumb once more to the pressures. But the motivation, but either way, they're wrong. It's either incompetence or malice. Both ways, it's very hurtful to see this Armenian land be given in this way. I mean, it could have been, half of our youth work in hotels in other areas of Jerusalem. They could have built that hotel.
Hmm.
With the amount of land. I mean, the Armenian Patriarchate is one of the biggest landowners of properties in Jerusalem. With the income they get, if they have a good management of the real estate, they could have built that hotel, employed Armenians over there. They could have built even old age home, because our old people are thrown in different parts of the city where they're not visited. We used to have 300 wells in the Armenian convent, in the Armenian quarter. Now none of them is operative, especially given the conflict and the geopolitical situation. These are small things to ensure your presence and your longevity and your future. You can just close the gates of the convent, which is what happened in 1948. They closed the gates, all the Armenians were inside, and they waited for the war to finish. Unfortunately, that is how it goes. I'm not completely for that. As I said, I do feel somewhere Palestinian Armenian. Obviously, the Armenian identity is much stronger, especially after I moved to Armenia for 4 years. But I don't like to stand idly by against facing injustice and oppression. Because that's how people are permitted to commit these horrific crimes, including ours, the crime against humanity, our genocide.
Yeah. Have there been other land incursions in the past, taking more of the Armenian quarter land? Has there been anything like this previously?
There have been, back during Yerishe, Patriarch Yerishe Derderian, so in the 70s, 80s, uh, a land which was another parking lot, actually. As you can see, there's a huge problem of parking lots in the old city, was given away for 99 years. A building, another open space was sold. It's known as Mgur's building because it was owned by an Armenian, gave it to the Patriarchate, and the Patriarchate eventually sold it. Or I think he asked the Patriarchate to buy it, they refused. Some sort of game over there. But these are completely adjacent to the Jewish quarter. And I do believe there were some pressures, but once more, it was, I think, mismanagement, incompetence, wrong diplomacy. But there was no incursion, you know. It was
Hmm.
given, the people, it was accepted, you know. But we had a huge problem of real estates during Yerishe's time as well, you know. The former director then, who was Shahe Ajemian, big scandals around him, who sold a lot of lands to 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 non-Armenians and to specifically settler groups. So there have been issues like that, but this is more existential. This is more existential than ever. I mean, as I said, right in front of the comment, the parents and the teachers, they come, they park in that parking lot, and they bring their kids, you know, to the Armenian school, which is the only Armenian school in the Holy Land, which is located inside the convent. So even that is now under threat. If people cannot bring their children anymore to the community centers, which are inside the convent as well, to the church, this will once more endanger the presence and the future of Armenians in the Holy Land.
What can we do to help?
Look, we have a fundraising for our legal team of the community set up. You can find it on Save the Ark page on X, on Instagram and Facebook. It's givebutter.com/Armenian Quarter. So this is only for the legal fees of the 2 lawyers that we've hired, so that they ensure the correct path and the right path for the Patriarchate to take against this deal. But we've also sued the Jerusalem municipality and the development authority for because, okay, let me go back a bit. So in April, that's when the private company, in April 2023. Actually, I didn't speak about the municipality deal. Can I go back? Will you
Sure.
edit it?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. So the first deal that was struck regarding this land was a usage agreement with the Jerusalem municipality. It was struck in March 2020. It's a 10-year usage agreement. Because the land was rough terrain, you know, it wasn't renovated, and we weren't getting the permits to do it. They came to an agreement where the municipality, through Harli, which is the Jerusalem Development Authority, would renovate the parking ground in exchange for 90 places, 90 spots to the Jewish residents of the Jewish quarter. But this is where the underhanded methods come. There was a clause in that usage agreement, which is a very good usage agreement, barring that clause, you know. They renovate it, they can use it for 10 years. 10 years later, you can say, thank you very much, God be with you. But there's a clause that says once, if there are plans for a hotel and permits for a hotel on this land, the usage agreement is considered null. So this is where the involvement of the Israeli government through the municipality and through the Jerusalem Development Authority come. So in 1 year later, about 1 year later, that's when the lease agreement was signed, the 98-year lease with the private company, which is called Hana Gardens. As I said, Danny Rubenstein and George Warwar. But they only possessed the land in April of 2023, so a few months ago. And that's also coincides with the defrocking of the priest. That also coincides with the protests, because that's actually when the community felt the danger immediately, when the land was dispossessed, you know, when the land was expropriated. And so they came in, they took over the land, and recently we took possession. That's so after the cancellation letter and all these intimidation tactics they used, we decided to create a buffer zone between us and them, and we possessed back a part of our land. And this is why we've been having sleepless nights this past week, because we've been sleeping there to make sure that that area of the land is possessed by us. Because, you know, if you don't go to court, once you go to court, the facts on the ground are frozen. So right now, no one is going to court. Every side is waiting for the other side to go to court. So we're trying to possess more of the land, so that when the case starts, which will be a very costly and lengthy case, you know, as I said, the Greeks went to court for 15, 16 years. So at least we would have some sort of possession of that land, you know. so that we can ensure the continuation of our communal life. And of course, that they cannot build a hotel once cases open.
Right.
Everything is frozen, as I said.
Right. So we can give, I do have the links below. So the Give
Yes.
Butter link, Give Butter. So that's an interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so we've got that link there and people can donate towards the legal fund.
Yeah. So
And
this is done through the Tatoyan Foundation, which is a foundation that has a 501 as well. This is important to say, so that it's tax deductible. And also, we have also put a checks and balances within our own legal teams. So the local teams are supervised by the Armenian American lawyers. They are paid from the foundation to the American lawyers to the local lawyers. So
okay.
everything is quite transparent. Everything is quite safe. And we've made sure of that because we
Okay,
want
great.
people to trust this initiative.
Right. That their money's going to go actually towards this,
Exactly.
to the legal process. Yeah. So, and then it's just awareness, I suppose, that this is happening. I mean, people, when they look over at the conflict in that area, they just think of expansion onto the Muslims, onto the Palestinians. And this is something that I've tried to speak out about since I went and visited myself. And when I was in Jerusalem, I actually stayed in I wouldn't say it's a hotel, but it was run by the Episcopalian. The Episcopalian
Oh, the
in
St. George. St.
yes,
George.
right.
It's
Stayed at
right
St.
down our
George.
ceramics factory, actually.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah.
like
So
20 meters away. Yes.
so I stayed there at St. George, and that was, that was a really unique and interesting experience. But the Christian plight is very much a part of this, and people forget that there are Christians who are there. I mean, when the Christian church in Gaza was bombed and ended up killing family members of one of our former congressmen, Justin Amash, some of his family members were sheltering in that Orthodox church in Gaza and were killed. And just the going and visiting the Christians, Ramallah being a Christian-run city in Palestine. People don't realize that Ramallah, which is like the de facto capital of Palestine, is
Capital.
actually Christian-run by decree. There's a heavy Christian presence in Jerusalem. Obviously, this is an area that is shared by all three religions, but the conflict that Christians almost forget themselves in a way in this and think, oh no, it's just Muslims and Jews. And it's like, well, Christianity was
And
also
that's a
born
huge,
there.
and that's a huge problem. These I don't know how to call them. These groups are encouraged by Christians in the United States, by
Yeah,
Christian evangelicals. I mean, who either completely disregard the plight of the local Christian communities or are completely ignorant to it. And I believe it's the latter.
yeah,
And that's why we should shed a light on that they should use their leverage to tell the state of Israel that, okay, we won't come for tourism, we won't give you money, we won't aid you financially if this is how you take care of your Christian communities.
right.
And this is a huge weapon we have in our hand that is not used, unfortunately. Uh, and that's also what's asked. Just ask about the Christians, the local Christian communities, and what they face, the day-to-day reality, the shrinking, declining demographics, which are unfortunately part of a plan to once more not have any Christians left in the Holy Lands. And as you said, in Bethlehem, in Beit Sahur, in Beit Jala, in Ramah, by decree, there's a Christian, presence. And this dates back to pre-1948 even. So even while being a minority among the Palestinian Muslims, we had more right. And this is the only democracy in the Middle East. Where is the freedom of religion, freedom of worship, and equal treatment of all religions and coexistence and so on? This is what's hurtful, and this is what I would ask from the American audience and the American Christian audience, not only, but also because they are big supporters of Israel. And I'm not saying everyone is, chooses their battles, everyone chooses who they support, but I'm saying if you're a Christian and you care about Christianity and the birthplace of Jesus and where he was resuscitated, the Holy Sepulchre, the Christian communities are the ones keeping those rights. The Christian communities are the ones keeping this spirituality alive. We are the custodians of these holy places, and we are the ones defending and protecting them. So how about you help us a bit more to keep our presence without being anti-Israel or pro-Palestine or anti-Palestine? Just help your Christian brothers and sisters to keep their presence in the Holy Land, to ensure that our rights are and our lands are protected.
Well, Setrag, thank you so much for this conversation, and good luck with saving Cow's Garden, saving the land, saving the Armenian presence in Jerusalem. We will have all those links down below for how people can learn more and also help donate towards the cause to help save the Christian presence in Jerusalem, which is, as you mentioned, very, very important. And Christians around the world should be more aware. I think it is ignorance. I think people are just not aware that Christians are there, and Christians are very much facing the same pressure as the Palestinians to leave, to get out, to have the area for one group and one group only. In my belief, I really think Jerusalem should be an international area. It should be something like the Vatican in a way, where it's
Me
separate
too.
from the actual state, right? You've got Italy and then you have the Vatican, and Jerusalem should be a completely neutral international city. And
Yeah, when I
that's
was asked, and it's easy, not even Jerusalem, only the old city, if you do it for the old
right,
city, because all the
right,
holy places are in the old city, and you even have the walls and the gates.
right.
So
So
it's
it's
very
super,
easy to
right.
maintain and supervise. And this would be my dream, that two states and Jerusalem, specifically the old city, as an international city. East Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine, West Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. And this is a thrice holy city, so everybody has a stake in it, and everybody needs to defend the old city of Jerusalem.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but unfortunately, there's other forces at play. But Setrag, thank you so much for your time, and good luck to you. Definitely wish you all the best in this.
Thank you. Honestly, I hugely appreciate you shedding a light on this. This is very important for us and for all of us. This is the future of the holiest and most beautiful city.
Well, guys, it's finally here. The fieldofgreens.com Black Friday sale is on, and it is incredible. Right now, you can get up to 30% off when you use the code VIP at checkout. Now, I love Field of Greens, and I've been seeing incredible results for myself when I drink it. I have more energy throughout the day. My skin looks healthier. My nails, everything just looks a lot better. Also, it helps with digestion. So there's just a feeling of better health overall when you drink Field of Greens, because it's made up of all of those fruits and vegetables that you should be getting in your diet that you're not. So when you drink Field of Greens, you're going to be getting all those nutrients and all of the health benefits that, of course, come with that. Now, this is one of the best things that you can add in your life for better health. I really love this stuff. So don't miss this massive sale and get up to 30% off your order. Visit fieldofgreens.com and enter VIP. That's fieldofgreens.com and enter VIP. And that link and information is down below so you don't forget. All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Very interesting conversation, eye-opening conversation. The links down below are there for you to help if you want to help the plight of the Christians in Jerusalem stake their ground and keep their property. Those links are down below. Thank you again for watching, and we will be back Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, with more great shows. Until then, have a great night, guys. Bye-bye.